Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of the Keepwize podcast. And we are happy to have you here. And this podcast, as we said in episode 1, is really about helping homeowners to manage, maintain, and grow the value of their home. And we just really want to ensure that we give homeowners the details and the information about how they can really better manage their home as an asset. So, with me again, we have our co host, Amira B. And Amira, how are you today?
I'm going well, Daniel. Hi, all. My name is Amir Rabino Bay, CEO, co founder of the Home Dispatch, and excited to be here with you all to help us uncover and learn more about what homeowners need today.
Thanks, Amira. And for episode 2, we have a special guest. And our special guest is Dr. Jessica Lautz of the National Association of Realtors. She is the Deputy Chief Economist and Vice President of Research. The core of her research focuses on analyzing trends for both NAR members, which is National Association of Realtors, and housing consumers. Through management of surveys, focus groups, and data analysis, she presents new and innovative ways to showcase results. I'd also add that Dr. Lutz finds new and interesting uh, things to talk about from the housing perspective. And we have on the Keeping Lead platforms, we've shared a lot of the stuff that she has worked on. So we are really excited about Dr. Lutz being here. She discusses, many different aspects, and some of her research is, to me, really groundbreaking in terms of what it actually says. She discusses research in major media outlets and international presentations in 2022. Dr. Lutz is named Risk Media Newsmaker in the influencer category, and she has done a bunch of research. She also volunteers at Nottingham Trent University as an industry fellow mentoring real estate graduate professionals. So we are happy and excited to welcome Dr. Lutz for episode 2. Welcome, Dr. Lutz.
Thank you both so much for having me. This is awesome. Thank you.
All right. Well, I've got lots of questions for you. And for many of those in the audience, I'm going to jump in there if that's okay. I mean, you have Daniel just read a beautiful resume, but I'd love to know more about your journey and how did you get to the place where you are doing this important work?
So definitely not a straight line. I don't know that anyone's career has been, but one of the first research projects actually that I worked on as an undergraduate that got me very interested in working in research at all was looking at the impact of a large resort and housing community coming into a small town.
Hmm.
And there was a lot of NIMBYism. There's a lot of people who did not want this new construction, who did not want this resort coming in. And also, this was my hometown. This is where I grew up, and there was a lot of resistance to it. And so, working on this project and looking through a different lens, a research lens, um, really helped me understand really how communities can face these struggles, but at the end of the day, how it can be really good for the community and economics and home growth. And so, looking at that from an external lens versus someone who lived in that community and grew up in that community really shaped my worldview. And I have to say, I continued researching this issue for probably 20 years now. And have come in and out of it, but really have fallen in love with it and really fallen in love with the intersection of what that all means to everyone when you think about building homeownership and building wealth through homeownership.
Hmm. That's exciting. And so you started off there, and your early interests were piqued. And then, tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing today and how it all relates.
Yeah, so now I'm at the National Association of Realtors. I have been here for a long time, since 2008, I think. So nearly 16 years that I have been working at NAR. And I have to say that the research that we do, I feel like it really helps consumers make educated decisions in the housing market, but it helps realtors be able to help their clients and move forward buying and selling homes and being the most educated expert that they can be. And so we're overseeing a wealth of research to be able to really put that information into the hands of everyone out there.
So, Dr. Lutz, you mentioned one of the things that for me, really piques my interest, which is consumer education and how do
Mhm.
we educate those consumers, whether or not you're first time in the market homeowner or wanting to buy a home, to the more experienced person who is in a home, but you want to know how to make the best choices. How does your research and what you do help really fuel better decision making?
Yeah, absolutely. So hopefully the research that we're putting out there does help consumers directly because they can see themselves reflected in the data as they're making housing choices, whether that's that I'm going to have to continue renting for the time being because I'm saving for this down payment, or whether it's putting information out there about what the typical down payment is for consumers. There's a lot of misinformation about that. The wealth gains that can be had through homeownership and what the typical homeowner has actually gained, which is pretty substantial. It's $210,000 over the course of 10 years as they've owned a home. Putting that information out there, I think, can be very helpful as someone moves forward and makes an educated decision of, or is this the right year for me to buy, or should I be holding off for a year because I need to scrape more money together or find the right place to live?
But you mentioned that figure of 210,000, which jumped out at me
Me too.
because from what I have seen, I don't know that as an industry we are typically putting that type of information out in front of the consumer for them to be able to make better decisions and choices. So how do we, even from your research, I know you did like the 2022 profile of the home buyers and sellers. How
Mhm.
does things like that, how can we really use information like that? Because that 210 statistic is a powerful indicator for me if I'm in my like 20s and I'm thinking about home ownership and I'm thinking about the return on my investment. So how can we better do that? Because I'm just kind of amazed at just that number jumping out and just the bells that goes off in my head.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the good things about that number is the brilliant economists at NAR actually broke that down on a local level. So we know that home prices are different. The value of homes is different in every local community. So you can actually dive in and see if that's reflected for you in your community where you live. When we look at the profile of home buyers and sellers, I love that report. Honestly, I get really excited when we release it because I know it has a wealth of data. Um, a couple of the things that I think is really helpful when we think about consumer information and consumer knowledge out there is to know, for instance, from this year's report, the typical home buyer is moving 50 miles from where they lived before, and the typical repeat buyer is moving 90 miles. So if you're thinking about moving to a new community that you may not actually personally know, you're not alone. A lot of people did that in the last year, and they did it because of housing affordability, but they also did it for something that I think flies under the radar. They wanted to be close to friends and family and their support system. All of that said, though, if someone's moving that long of a distance away, they may not know that local community. And so their reliance on those local experts has to be top notch because I don't know communities that are 90 miles from me at all. I'm going to have to rely on those local experts, your real estate agent, your realtor, your mortgage broker to get you through that transaction and tell you everything that you can know about that neighborhood and that home.
Mm.
Mira, you had a question.
Yeah, I mean, I was actually again like so blown away with that number 210 because there's just been a debate. I know that at least being in the home space, people are tussling with the decision of should I buy or should I rent? And I needed that stat like last week when I was talking to a friend because I don't think people understand the trade-offs and the choices. And it may be okay now, but it may not work for you later. And when is the right time? So how do you kind of advise, or how does the data that you all provide help people really think about, um, you know, how to think about those tough decisions of now and later, and how can they use that, and who are the people that are also using the data that can help them?
Yeah, absolutely. So realtors for sure are using the data. We know that it's getting into the hands of realtors. Of course, the best thing for a researcher to hear is that someone likes the data and is reading it, because the worst nightmare that we have is that it sits on a shelf and no one reads it ever. So I'm really happy that realtors are reading this information. The other big group that is the media. The media is grabbing onto this information. They know that we're a trusted source of data and that they can trust that we are an honest source. So they are picking it up and they are grabbing it. But absolutely, that $210,000, I think it's really powerful when we think about, sure, in some communities right now, because of the rise in interest rates, it may be cheaper on a monthly basis to be able to grab a rental unit. But that's not long term. We know that that's for today, right now, at this moment. But you're at the whim of a landlord moving forward who may need to raise the rent or does raise the rent, and you lose out on those wealth gains as well. So we have to keep everything in context and perhaps look at a broader perspective when we look at one data point, look at a larger trajectory of that data.
Can I ask another question? You just mentioned people using the data, and we know data is powerful. And you mentioned realtors that are using the data. And for a consumer, right? I think a lot of times people are just looking at them for one of helping them with the transaction, and still the value of that. Sometimes they don't know how to assess it. How do you know when people are using this data, and how does that show up when you're as a consumer when you're working with these professionals?
So I get really excited because sometimes we'll see the data. Honestly, I'll be sitting and reading a magazine, and I'll see the data point, and I'll see that it's from our research, and I'll be quite proud of that. I know it's getting into the hands of consumers because if I can pick up a glossy magazine while I'm getting my nails done, then it's getting into the hands of consumers. So that's a good thing. But I know that realtors are using it too. Certainly, as myself, as a consumer, have talked to plenty of realtors and said, okay, I need to buy or I need to sell a house. What do I do? And who do I need to talk to? And we'll get a pitch from different realtors, and I'll see data points pop up there too. But I know that they're using it in their listing presentations, and they'll come back to us and they'll say, how can we use this in our marketing as well?
So, Dr. Lutz, as a researcher who is really keen on ensuring that the data points are in the hands of the consumers and the realtors, I guess it must give you a sense of pride to know, because I've seen your name pop up in multiple, you know, publications. So I presume it gives you a sense of pride to understand that the work that you're doing is actually reaching some of the target audience that you are, catering towards. But from a standpoint of the consumer, do you think that the consumer uh, is being or has enough information really to make the best decisions based on what you have seen? And how can we get better at doing that?
Mhm.
Because from where I sit, I think that consumers still, there was a stat that came out last week that said, that a lot of consumers are misinformed of just where the price levels of where housing should be. And for me, that was concerning because I think that consumers were like at the lower end of 200 and something when it's more than 100,000 under where the market is. So, is the information out there, or is enough information out there for consumers to really make the right decision?
Hmm. I think it's hard. We get a lot of information thrown at us on a daily basis. And I have to say that a lot of times there's headlines that data points are going up by 100% change when really it's going from 1% to 2%. So we have to look, I think, beyond those headlines. I also, I have a deep sigh for this because I'll pick up my phone and I'll look at Instagram and I'll click through the reels and I'll see a lot of misinformation that's out there, unfortunately. And so I think we just have to really fight through that, to be able to see the correct information and go beyond those headlines as well.
Interesting. Um,
Well, Dr. Lux, you can still hear us, correct?
I can still hear you. My video has gone, hasn't it?
Yes.
yeah, it has.
but that's okay. It's a podcast. We can keep talking until it's figured out. One question I have for you is around like the trends you're seeing for 2023. What are some of the things that your data is helping us understand what we should expect for homeowners to start thinking about for?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I would say going into the spring market, because we're at the end of January now, we honestly need to already be starting to think about the spring market. I would say the big things that are changes that we're seeing right now are the drop in interest rates. So they had peaked at 7%, and seeing that decline, now it's at 6.1%. That opens up the credit box and affordability for a lot of consumers out there who may have been priced out at 7%. So just a few $100s a month can mean quite a big difference in the type of home and if you can buy it all. I think the other thing that we need to consider too is that interest rates are probably going to keep ticking down, which means that more consumers will jump into the market. And hopefully, we won't have that feeding frenzy that we did last year when we saw 5.5 offers for every home that was listed. But it's very possible that there's a lot of people who jump back into the housing market. So if you're thinking about buying, getting your ducks in a row, having all your experts, your realtors, your mortgage broker ready, and your neighborhood really scouted out of where you want to start looking for a home.
Mm. And I'm assuming the same thing for sellers, right? This is a market where if you are ready to place or help with inventory, this might be the great market to, if you've been thinking about this for a while, to go ahead and move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I would say for sellers is to really talk to your realtor too, because this market is not 6 months ago. It's not a year ago. So your home moving for 100,000 more than asking price with a line out the door of
Mhm.
consumers, it's not the same market. So having the right expectations moving into that, making sure that you trust your realtor and where you're going to price your home, I think is incredibly important. No one wants to leave money on the table, but if you want your money, if you want your house to get a solid offer, you do want to price it appropriately too. So, really, just having those frank conversations with your realtor about where your local market is incredibly important.
So in one of your research you did, pieces you talked about multiple offers these as affordability is further eroded. And one of the things that what we saw in this last 2 years of a very crazy market cycle, and you alluded to it, in terms of multiple offers and in terms of how much, how crazy the market was in terms of like 100K over asking in some cases. Has the market totally shifted now from those, because yes, we have inflation, interest rates, sorry, that have gone, to 6% versus or 7% versus 3%. But really, we do have a crisis still because prices are still high. So, what are buyers supposed to be looking at in terms of making decisions based on what they see in the market?
Yeah, I think for consumers right now, they really have to be taking what the market is. So looking at what happened in the last year and the really steep demand that was happening, we have to know that that's not necessarily going to happen in the future. But that being said, I reserve the right to change that opinion just because we don't have the housing inventory right now to really support the household growth that we could be happening for young adults, for millennials who may be doubling up with family, who may be renting with roommates, who want to buy a home, who want to enter into the housing market. We just don't have that housing right now for those young adults. We don't have affordable housing inventory. So putting that inventory into the market could really tamper those bidding wars that we had seen in the past and could prevent them from happening again, honestly.
And so as a market, you know, part of when you start doing some research into the market, especially around the affordable range, you realize that, and this is something that I've realized, and I have this one saying, it's that what we paid, because you see comparisons, especially for younger homeowners who may be trying to get into the market, that, well, 30 years ago we did it this way, and this was the price, and we didn't have these things to contend with. But I think that the market it's totally, radically, drastically different. And so, the cost of housing will never be what it was in the past. How can we start as a consumer buying public of assets really focus on making sure that we I would say respect the value of the market in terms of where the market is in its current conditions. Because I think that from what some of the research that you read, you get a lot of people, you have a conversation with your parents who would say, hey, that wasn't so in this day, or it was so, but I think the market has completely changed. So how do we make sure that we at least create the awareness for homeowners around, or potential homeowners around this, but also I would say reduce the psychological pressure, because I think that number say you have 28 million persons who are thinking of buying homes in the near future. So how do we reduce the pressure that is on them to make sure that at least they have the details around making the best decision?
Yeah. You know what? That is a huge topic and it's very front of mind for me, honestly. We hear so many myths right now, and some of them I think are coming, from an older era of, oh, well, you have to have 20% down for a down payment. When the typical down payment for a first time buyer is 6 to 7%. And there's FHA loans and there's VA loans and USDA loans where you can have a significantly lower down payment and gives a wonderful opportunity for first-time buyers to enter into the market. So really just spelling those myths, getting the real information out there to consumers is incredibly useful, because it's very possible that there are mortgage-ready consumers out there right now still saving away, thinking they need 20% down when they actually don't need that. So that's one of them for sure. But really thinking about how many first-time homebuyers, especially, may need to make a compromise. It's not the HGTV dream, perhaps. I mean, I love HGTV, don't get me wrong, but you may not get all the bells and whistles in your first home. You may need to put a little DIY effort into it, or you may have to compromise on your commute, but maybe you're not going into the office 5 days a week now. Making sure that something gives so that you can enter homeownership, but it's the right thing for you personally. I think that's the important thing, rather than perhaps being guided by other voices, perhaps that are lending into that transaction.
Yeah, I love the fact that you just brought that. I mean, I think the 20% is a big one. I hear people talking about that they need. I'm like, well, do you really need that? So 6 or 7% is much more appetizing, and I think it's a reframing that needs to happen, which is why this data is so important. And at least how I think about homeownership, it's an investment, right? And you're going to it's a way to increase economic wealth as well. And so as you're thinking, you alluded to it earlier. I love to hear, like, when you are trying to help consumers learn about how this could help increase wealth, your thoughts on that, because I do see, I got someone I know, a good friend, and myself on TikTok, and like there's a dialogue around like the value in owning a home. And I don't think everyone's seeing the full picture. It's just one point of view. And so I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on around the wealth that could be generated from it.
Yeah, absolutely. It really is the number one way that Americans build wealth, is through homeownership. It's the number one asset that not only is the roof over our heads where we go down at night, but it's also where we have our wealth that really is built. Um, and I think reminding consumers of that is incredibly important. Because while there's, the TikTok videos and the reels out there that talk about the importance of homeownership, I'm also seeing stuff that talks about, oh, maybe you should invest in the stock market instead. But we know
Yep.
that's pretty volatile. So maybe we should be thinking about homeownership as that asset. One of the things that does show up in the data consistently, if I can just plug the value that women see in homeownership, single women are second only to married couples as home buyers, and they consistently see that this is a value to them. This is financial stability for their future, and they get it. And they're out there and they're purchasing homes and they're making financial sacrifices to enter homeownership. So I think perhaps we can all be more like the single women out there. I'm not entirely sure, but they seem to consistently get it in the data.
Yeah. Yeah, there are definitely lots of reels talking about. I mean, we help with like people with projects and repairs, and they're like, it's so expensive to fix something. It's like, but you're investing in your kitchen that will improve the value of your home. You're not going to do that with the rental piece. So, helping to happy to hear you say that.
And also, I would say that I think that the numbers say like 10 million single women are homeowners, and there are even more homeowners of single women than men. You know, you alluded to that. But and it is a conversation piece that we need to, as a society, I guess, start having, because I guess there's so much pressure on people to do things. You know, hey, get married, have that baby, get a house. You know, the whole American dream. And I do believe that even part of the conversation of home ownership is that we have romanticized the whole conversation. You know, I said this before, and it's one of my leading thought pieces is that, hey, we've romanticized home ownership to the point where we don't necessarily think of your home as an asset, but we more think of your home as, oh well, you know, I love my house so much and I need to have this. But I think it's really important that, and I'm not sure if the women are hearing it more than the men. So maybe it's just a woman listening with way more eyes focused on the return on the investment that they're making. But you know, how do we send this message to uh, the broader society that, hey, your home is, because for most of us, our home is the most expensive purchase we'll ever make in our lifetimes. Yet it doesn't necessarily come across in that. So how do we make sure that, and Dr. Lautz, from your research, you know, how have you seen this like translated into your research? But in terms of you coming back, how can we really ensure that people are hearing that in the decisions that they make?
Yeah, again, fixing up the kitchen, sure, it can be expensive, but right, you get return on value. And I think that's important is to reframe it as an investment. But also you're going to have joy in that project too. You're going to enjoy that new kitchen. You're going to cook in your house more, and host people over and get excited about that. So I think that's important to keep in mind is as we work on our homes that this is investing in your future. This is investing in the biggest asset that you have. You may hold a mortgage on that property, but one day you may not. And you will go down the road and you will sell that and you will get that return on value back. And I think that's important to know too, is just how much you get back on each project that you're putting in. And even the low dollar value projects like painting a room or refinishing your hardwood floors can have return on value that's actually more than what you put into it.
That's I think that we need to really highlight that more. But from what you're seeing, one of the conversations that we have been having at Keepingly and what we're building our platform is really around this whole conversation of home ownership sustainability. And I wrote a piece, you know, for Fast Company that really talked about how we need to look at home ownership sustainability and making sure that this asset that we're putting the work into it. How, from your data and your research, what do you see in terms of us being better stewards of the houses that we own? And you know, what is the, because I know you've done some research on this, but what are the biggest renovations you would see, or you know, projects that you see from your data showing the that what people should be investing in when they look at projects around their home sustainability?
Yeah. So the biggest projects for return on value are actually low dollar value projects. Sustainability, though, I feel like really bleeds into so many projects and why people do them. Because when you take a project on, you're thinking about, sure, I may need to fix up the faults and features, I may need to redecorate, but also how can I make this sustainable? And so it ends up in all kinds of projects where it's not just the insulation or the roof upgrade, it's also the windows and the doors. It's also the HVAC. If you're going to have to replace these units, then you may as well look for a more sustainable option. And also at the end of the month, maybe you're paying less for your energy costs, and that's a win win. So you're getting your return on value that way as well. So just thinking about your investment in that way, it's not just the total cost of the project, but it's also the return on value that you could be adding just to your monthly budget overall by thinking about utility costs.
I'm going to just ask a little bit. I mean, we help a lot of clients with like their home projects and not necessarily sustainable focus, but what are you seeing? I mean, we obviously, because of the pandemic, saw a lot of clients wanting to do the things that were not just the kitchen and the bathroom, right? Like those were two major projects that most people were doing. And um, all of a sudden they were doing all these other things that they wanted to do just to customize and make their homes more there for them. Are there things or trends that you're seeing that homeowners are doing that maybe new homeowners need to think about when they're purchasing a home that can help customize their house, um, that will enable them to think about the market a little differently?
Looks like I'm not okay.
You're here.
Okay, sorry. I don't know what's going on with my computer today. I guess there's gremlins in it, or one of my cats just attacked everything. I'm not entirely sure. Sorry about that. Um, so when we look at projects and we look at customizing, I think it's pretty interesting because we often think about younger consumers maybe wanting to customize their home, but also we have to remember that older consumers have a lot of money to spend. So it could be older consumers who are really taking that on as well. They have home equity, but they also may have moved into this new home as well, and so they're customizing it. But looking at customization, it's often projects like the kitchen and bathroom, but it's also using space within the home differently. So I think during the pandemic, we all thought about, oh, we need a home office, we need two home offices. But then we also saw projects like remodeling the entire basement and making it into usable space,
Mm,
or adding on into the attic, maximizing all the square foot that you could. Because if consumers were staying put and the homeowner said, I'm going to stay put in this home, I'm not going to jump into this crazy housing market right now as everyone's moving and needs that extra space, how can I find it within my actual space itself? So we saw a lot of customization that way of really maximizing the space within the home. Maybe it's even putting on an accessory dwelling unit or putting on an addition to that house. If you can't build up, then maybe you're going sideways or one way or the other there. We saw that happening.
yeah.
So in the last, we have like about a few more minutes to 10 more minutes. But one of the questions I have is, in all the research that you've done, Dr. Lutz, what has been the most, I would say, interesting piece that you've come across? The thing that you found that most shocked you from just your research, that you were thinking one way and the research, totally floored you in terms of what you see, what you saw, and how did that impact you in terms of just your way of thinking of it?
Oh, I think I don't wanna say it happens on a daily basis, but I will say it happens frequently where I am just kind of floored by the results, and, I'll pull a coworker over to my computer and say, "This is real, right? We did the math here real, right? Yeah, this is accurate." Or, I'll call my sister and I'll say, "Oh my goodness, you can't believe this data point. Is this accurate?" I think a couple of them that really stand out to me of late are, when first-time homebuyers go to purchase their home now, they're the oldest we've ever seen. That's not the surprise. They're 36 years old. And the reason why is because of all the headwinds in the housing market, the lack of inventory and affordability. But when they purchased their home last year, they plan on owning that home for 18 years. That is a very long period of time and the longest we've ever seen.
What was it before? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, so historically, we saw the lowest when we first started collecting the data was 7 years is their
Yes.
intention of owning, and then it jumped to 10, and now it's jumped to 18.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
yeah. So as we all wrap our heads around it, I thought about that data point a lot. And I think it speaks to a few things that happened in the housing market last year. One was lower interest rates. So if someone locked in the 2-3% range, they're saying, I'm never moving from that home. I think another thing that happened is people moved farther out. They got that single family home in the burbs, so they skipped their starter property as well. But I also think it speaks to people saying that this is not a home in the short term. It's not a quick, I'm going to flip this property anymore or my entry level home. It's their investment for their future. And this is where they're going to stay put. And over time, they may have to revitalize that space and rethink about it and recustomize it if they really plan to stay put. That being said, they'll probably move sooner than those 18 years because something in their life could change, a new job or a new baby or new marriage, and that'll of course upend them and need to move to a new home. So
that is a shocking.
Any other?
Yeah. Let's see here. Another one. I think I talked about the 50 miles, but I think, we recalculated that over and over. If I hadn't talked about it, then I've definitely talked about it already today. Sorry about that. People are moving 50 miles and 90 miles for a repeat buyer. And so I think that really does speak about people moving to a completely different area than where they had been before. So that it's really surprising because before the last year, people moved 10 to 15 miles. So really seeing a pretty big difference in what that means to that buyer and moving to a further location. So that one's pretty shocking to me too. Also, this is go for it.
I was just going to say, so I think you did a little, because I had to process that one earlier. So we're saying people are moving closer to family or friends. And I mean, I live in the Bay Area, so we definitely saw a big migration of people in a probably like 36, 37 younger, moving away from the city and moving to all over the country. Interesting places they're moving. So that resonates with me. But what did we see before that? I'm just curious. You said 10 to 15 miles. So what do you think was probably happening with their lives then?
I think if people are moving 10 to 15 miles, they were just really upgrading a home, getting a slightly nicer home, downsizing a home. We just don't see those types of moves right now. We see people moving really long distances because they need more space, period. It's not just a slight upgrade because I got a promotion. And so we do see that 10-year in home is now 10 years. People are holding on to that home, that asset for 10 years versus 6 to 7, which we saw historically. So yeah, I think it is a really big change that we're seeing in how people view their homes.
Thank you. Okay, tell me the third step. Go ahead. You got another one.
Another one. Okay. Let's see here. One that I think, this is definitely fluffier. So I'll give you a much lighter note. We're seeing pets really be a top priority for consumers. So where they buy homes, their neighborhood choices. We've heard all the headlines about birth rates down and everything and pet adoption during the pandemic up. But wow, do we see it in the data? It's a really high priority for young buyers, for single women, their neighborhood choice and what they need in their home. And I have to tell you, I do have 4 cats, the gremlins who have somehow killed my computer today, but they absolutely, they win the house. And so, I get it as a pet owner, they get top priority for me. And so I can see how people want to choose their home for their pet.
That resonates. I had a client who we had a project, and the project was they wanted to help us with creating a pet door, and they did all of this Pinterest boarding of like a pet door that would work for their house as they customize. And I was like, wow, they like took this to a whole nother level. And you had some people that asked us for help, but that was it stuck to me. And so I can see that, particularly there's a lot of new pet owners that have just come on the market as well. So they increase their family.
Yeah, absolutely. They're going to need room for their pets in the pet bed and the catios and all that kind of stuff. And I'll tell you, very embarrassing. My last remodel that I did in my house was over the holidays to create a cat closet. I brought my favorite contractor in and said, "Can you please create this corner in the basement so that the cat litter can all stay in this corner and will not go into the human bathroom anymore?" And he put little cat doors in there and a filter, and it's changed my life.
I bet you.
So, Dr. Lautz, that upgrade is something that you need to document, and for we are advocating for making sure that you document those upgrades and innovation, because the future cat lover who wants to get a house may love yours.
I'm never leaving though. Well, I'll be here forever.
So coming close to the wrap up, one of the questions, my oddball question for you is like, based on all the data that you see, and if you had it in your power to really impact the market, how would you use the knowledge and data that you have to make the housing market better?
Honestly, I'd build more housing inventory, but I wouldn't necessarily build big single family homes. I would build smaller units. We know that there's more single adults living independently. And if they're not living independently, they may want to be. And so, looking at smaller units, looking at how people live today, maybe they don't need a parking space because they're taking public transportation or living in a walkable community, thinking about higher density neighborhoods. I think it would make it a lot more affordable for young adults today who do want to purchase a home and build their biggest asset.
Mira,
I mean, coming from you. No, I'm just saying, coming from you, right? Like, you know all the data, so you're going to make the best recommendations ever. No, I'm just going to say thank you, Dr. Lutz, for coming and for being and having um, to show the power of data. Like, that's what you do. Like, you know, from a startup, for someone who worked at other companies, it truly, like, we always looked at the data. Like, what does the NAR data say? And it informs so many decisions. It informs so many insights. And so I'm just really thankful that we got the opportunity to talk to the woman in charge. So thank you.
Thank you so much. This is a really fun discussion. So I really appreciate you having me on. Thank you.
Lots. Thank you from us, at Keepwize with Keeping Lee for taking the time to discuss with us what you're seeing in the data and the trends and the decisions that we need to be making as consumers. And, as we close, to me, what stands out is that 210 number that we need to be thinking of in terms of what is the return on investment that people are seeing as they, you know, invest into their property and how this continues to be the largest asset that most of us would ever own. So thank you from us, and hopefully we'll have you on as you continue to create more groundbreaking studies and information and insights so that we can really help our consumers and the potential homeowners, but the current homeowners, to be able to make decisions that really impact them.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I would love to join again. Thank you.
Thank you.